Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Belo Center for New Media in the heart of Austin, Texas. This is our brand new building. This is our first big event here. We're just delighted to see you. My name's Glenn Frankel. I'm the director of the School of Journalism here at UT, and I'm here to welcome you to the annual Mary Alice Davis Lecture. I've got a few people to thank for today, starting with Mike Wilson, who's the head of the development office here at UT, and his able crew who helped put this together. Also, Philip Salazar, my school's administrative assistant, who handled just about all the logistics and planning here. And he had help from some folks from the staff at the journalism school and the IT folks who put together all the different microphones and setups. And also Professor Wanda Cash, who is the associate director of the School of Journalism and very important in getting all this organized as well. And finally, Dr. Rod Hart, who's the Dean of the College of Communication, and I would say the person who's the principal architect and author of this beautiful new building that we're in today. But most of all, I'd like to thank the people for establishing this lecture event. We're here today to honor a truly special Texas journalist, the late Mary Alice Davis, who's a graduate of our school, and her wonderful family. Mary Alice's husband, Jim, his daughter, Rachel, their daughter, Rachel, and Jim's wife, Jan, who've created this event in her memory, this lecture series, which is now in its 8th year. They're here this afternoon with a lot of their friends and Mary Alice's former colleagues, and I'd like to begin by inviting one of those colleagues, Mary Alice's former boss, Rich Oppel, former editor of the Austin American-Statesman. Rich has come to tell us a little bit about the woman we're honoring today. Ladies and gentlemen, Rich Oppel.
Thank you very much, Glenn. It's an honor to be here, and I'm just delighted to be back with so many old friends that I haven't seen in a couple of years or so. It's kind of like a 50th high school reunion without quite as many wrinkles. So, 14 years ago, Mary Alice Davis attended a symposium recognizing the 100th anniversary of the Daily Texan. Walter Cronkite was there. So too were Bill Moyers, Ronnie Duggar, and Mark McKinnon. The state of the media underwent extreme and painful examination by experts at Merciless Analysis. Returning from that event, Mary Alice wrote a column for the American-Statesman. She reported that the comments of these speakers confirmed her belief that the media were in great distress. More than that, she wrote, democracy was dying too. While we consumers of media were witnessing the demise of democracy, she said, there seemed an odd complacency. We seemed to accept the deterioration of media into a shallow, vacuous shell of itself. In her words, we were amusing ourselves to death. Here's how she put it, and I quote, too few have the time and energy to seek out the nourishing grains among the cloud of chaff. Entertainment news, vapid features, product plugs, and celebrity nattering, unquote. Moving forward from that date, we can be fairly assured that had Mary Alice been around in 2008, she would have been livid over the bailout of New York investment banks as opposed to efforts to save the banking industry. We can believe that because at the time of the Daily Texan gathering, she called for an investigation and condemnation of a similar giveaway. The U.S. government was carving up the public airwaves and presenting them on a platter to giant media companies, including potentially the one that she and I work for. She had her doubts that the media would rally to the need, and she expressed those doubts as follows, quote, but first, a word from the sponsors. Some funny real-life videos, a few features, and more news about personalities who are famous for being famous. I'm 4 years gone from the producing side of the medium. I am a consumer who largely enjoys new media, the speed, the access to easily retrievable files, the layering of data, the interactivity, and the growing diversity of voices. I think Mary Alice would enjoy much of today's innovations as well. She was more inclined to celebrate the good and new than to grump about the bad and old. Yet there are journalistic virtues from Mary Alice's time that continue to fade under the remorseless decline of revenues and profits, thinning newsroom staffs, and the loss of centuries of staff experience. Reflection, restraint, access to vast financial and legal resources, the judgment that comes with mature reporters and editors, and the separation of opinion from news. Listen to Arnold Garcia, her direct editor, and I quote, "Editorial writers are often described as being passionate about this or the other. What that usually means is that they use words like blunt instruments. Using words to bludgeon isn't writing, it's assault. You can be passionate all day long, but if you're constantly wagging a finger in the reader's face, it's wasted effort." Mary Alice's mark as a skilled editorialist was to use wit and grace to make a point, unquote. We are indebted to the family of Mary Alice Davis, most especially her husband, Jim Davis, for endowing the lecture series that allows UT to bring thoughtful people to Austin, and for keeping Mary Alice's torch burning in our community. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. You know, it's a sublimely gratifying moment in journalism when a great reporter is matched up with a great theme and delivers a body of great work over an extended period of time. And we're very fortunate today to have David Carr with us, who's done just exactly this with the New York Times. David is here today to help us interpret and navigate this stunning and revolutionary age. For a decade now, in fact, his work on the world of media has graced the pages and the website and the iPad and the iPhone apps of the world's greatest newspaper, the New York Times. His stuff is informative, it's witty, it's cutting edge in the best sense of the word. He travels to the borderlands, to the edge of the oceans, to the cliffs and crevices of the new media world, and he interviews and writes about the prophets and the wise men and the fools, not to mention the occasional felon. He covers the great innovations, the pipe dreams, the morbid symptoms, all of this of the digital age. And in his spare time, he writes for the Culture Desk, interviews celebrities, and covers the Oscars. He's kind of become our master of ceremonies for the new media age. Let me add, there are a lot of young and future journalists in the room today, a lot of them from my class, and I just want to add one crucial point about David. David is first and foremost not a commentator and not a media celebrity. He's first and foremost a reporter. All of David's work is special, but his most special work, I think, is getting on the phone, getting out in the field, getting the documents still, and talking to people. His front page piece 2 years ago on the Tribune company and the financial and sexual shenanigans of its power-crazed leadership was really a model of great reporting. And despite the threats of legal action from the company, the story ran on the front page of the New York Times on October 5th, 2010. And 18 days later, I think we're just past the second anniversary of this, Randy Michaels, the company's chief executive and chief sexual harasser, was forced to resign. David's pieces last year on the criminal practices and the pathology of Rupert Murdoch's media empire were pretty seminal as well. He's really made it a personal crusade to write about the misdeeds of journalists and their sources. He holds up the mirror to our world, and it's not always a pretty picture, but he captures also the innovation and the aspirations of this fascinating and perilous moment when journalism is undergoing really its reinvention and its reimagination. David seems to have been born for this work, but in fact, it's been a long road to get here. He was born in a suburb of Minneapolis. He went to 2 different universities, I believe, but graduated from the University of Minnesota with a BA, did a variety of blue-collar jobs and journalism jobs in the Twin Cities, and also did a large variety of drugs at times, soft and hard.
You said you weren't going to mention it.
We're not on the record here, don't worry.
I see cameras, but
His memoir, which I believe was published, but The Night of the Gun, it's dead honest, it's harrowing, and of course it's beautifully reported. And it's an account of life on the edge and how he cleaned up. It wasn't pretty, but he and his family survived it, and The Night of the Gun is one of those rare memoirs that really grabs your heart and doesn't let you go. David went on to become editor of the Twin Cities Reader and wrote a media column there. Then he got to Washington, D.C. and became editor of the city paper and wrote a terrific media column in D.C., often focusing on the foibles and misdemeanors of the Washington Post, my own alma mater. I knew him briefly there, and I really loved his media criticism, and I think it helped pave his way to the New York Times, where he's worked since 2002. David's going to speak to us about the vast changes in the media world, and then he's going to take questions. And I know you'll have lots of questions, but let me finish this introduction by quoting from the conclusion of The Night of the Gun. David writes about his survival after his drug addiction, and he says it was a much closer call, quote, than I would like to admit. I now inhabit a life I don't deserve, but we all walk this earth feeling we are frauds. The trick is to be grateful and hope the caper doesn't end anytime soon, unquote. Now, this is the truth, but it's really not the whole truth, because David is, in fact, very much the real thing. Ladies and gentlemen, David Carr.
hi, everyone. Can you feel that new building smell? I just love that. I hope I don't stink it up by anything I do. It just, everything smells so new around here. You don't get that a lot in journalism. First of all, my deepest thanks go to Jim and the rest of the people who are here for Mary Alice. All of us, somebody came before all of us, right? And we all stand on the shoulders of somebody. And for me to even be mentioned in the same breath, but let alone giving a lecture that bears her name is a deep, deep honor to me. And I hope I'm equal to it. I take it very, very seriously. The rest of it, not so much. But I'm really thrilled to be here. And I thanks, Glenn, for helping me get here. Like Rich, I noticed the number of young faces in the audience, was very, very impressed as they filed in. And I said to Glenn, boy, it's amazing that all these kids are here. He said, yeah, it's really amazing. I could see something in his face. I said, you gave him extra credit for coming. It's true, isn't it? Okay, there you go. He probably told you there'll be free whiskey afterwards. There won't be. Although there is something, right? There's like probably some bad white wine and some crackers you can't eat. And I'm a little worried to be standing up here because we all know that Mary Alice wasn't the biggest fan of pop culture and media, and I spent 4 years sort of full-time covering the Oscars for like 5 months straight, leaping around like a homeless guy on red carpets chasing celebrities. And I'm not proud of that, but I'm sort of afraid I'll get hit by lightning standing here. I think we should begin with the contents of the newsroom. Which mic am I on? Am I on this one? Yeah. Or that one? Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. I think before you talk about changing the newsroom, you should talk about what's inside them. News is a business, anybody will tell you, even the most pernicious bean-counting person in editorial, where the assets move up and down by elevator every single night. And if you don't have those human assets, you haven't got squat. It doesn't matter how many platforms you have, what your Twitter followers are, what your Facebook page gets. Unless you got people picking up the phone, making the calls, cracking open the documents, writing the columns, it doesn't make any difference. I didn't know her. I knew her work. I didn't know her. But I heard enough to feel like we do, and I'm going to just be presumptuous and say we had a couple things in common. Mary Alice, I think I'm right about this. She was like the first woman copy editor. Is this right?
First woman copy editor on the Caller in Corpus Christi, which was a morning newspaper. So the women, they didn't have any women on the copy desk because they thought that women should not have to go out after dark. And she was the one who was chosen in 1966 to break that, to be the first woman on their Caller copy.
So she was a pioneer as a copy editor, as a journalist. I came into the business to torture copy editors. Seeing my raw copy is like seeing me with my shirt off. You're gonna want to erase that memory right away. The first story I handed in, and I can write and I can put sentences together. Me and grammar were not exactly a big bromance, I gotta say. I handed in my first story. It's like, what did you think? What did you think? And the editor just looked at me and says, a lot is 2 words, okay? A lot. I learned early to suck up to my editors because I needed them. And oddly enough, I eventually became one, as you pointed out, Glenn. And I pivoted from that into writing, as did Mary Alice. I did it because I worked with young people and I got sort of tired of hopping around on one foot because my other foot was always up their ass. Did I just say that aloud? I didn't mean to. The thing is when you're an editor, you take like C- or C+ copy and you get it to maybe B- or B+. And after a while, you think to yourself, why am I making all these guys look good? Why? And I just thought and I didn't exactly have the great bedside manner as an editor. My last job at Washington City Paper, there was the arts editor who was an extremely talented, smart guy named Brad McKee. And his end of the office was called Cape of Good Hope. And then my end of the office was called Cape Fear. I'm not joking about this. And as you probably notice, I'm somewhat of an idiosyncratic communicator. And the one guy came out of my office and they're like, what did he say? There was a lot of yelling in there. He said, I either just got fired or got a raise. I can't tell which. Eventually I gave it up and wrote a column. And that's something Mary Alice and I share. She wrote a column known for its feistiness and its deadly accuracy. I wrote a column known for its feistiness. She was very good at Trivial Pursuit and really bad at drinking. Me too. From what I read and from what I've heard, she found some of her best friends among the very weak coffee and very strong bonds of people in recovery in church basement. And that certainly has been my own experience. I was taught by my mother from a very young age that what defines you is not your relationship to important people or powerful people, but what you do and how you treat the least of us, which I think is a value I share in common. Journalism is, at bottom, done well about social justice. One of the things that I noticed in reading her work, and this is a big bugaboo of mine, is she felt government should be transparent and accountable to the people who elected it. And I've got my own issues with this administration, but they came in promising to be the most transparent administration on record and have used the Espionage Act over and over to prosecute people, including yesterday, a good source who gave a name to a journalist. That stuff drives me crazy, and I'd imagine if she were here, it'd drive her crazy too. I'm not much of a pioneer, as she was. There's not like the journalism business is short on doughy white guys who drink too much. But I'm not a pessimist either. I'm very upbeat about what's been going on. One thing I gotta say, there was a layoff this week that just totally hit me right in the gut. Full stop. Flipped me out. It's like I had a big moment out of that. The big layoff this week, guy quit, took the buyout. Clark Kent. Working at the Daily Planet for 40 years and jumps up in the newsroom and says, you guys, like Mary Alice, you cover entertainment way too much. It's all crap. I'm going to start a blog. So now Superman has left us. I think when he starts his blog, he's going to find out. Here's what he said to Perry White, his editor. Why am I the only one sounding like a grizzled, ink-stained wretch who believes news should be about, I don't know, news? Wait until he gets out on the web. Lolcats, side boobs, best beaches where nobody seems to have any clothes on. That's a lot of what drives traffic on the web. And he's also going to find out that when it comes, that serious news can be a kind of kryptonite if you don't watch it. You got to do a good job with that. So who killed newspapers? Lex Luthor, I guess, right? Was it the internet? Bunch of snot-nosed kids with modems? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it was you and me that decided that over and over this huge fire hose of information that somebody taking some words, and then declaring a full halt to the news cycle at 10 o'clock at night, as you did. What time did you close your paper?
11:40 in some cases, 12:15 at the very latest.
Yeah, and 11:40, and you just decided, you laid out your front page and said, these are the 5 or 6 or 7 stories. Six that my readers need to know about. Slammed them into print, right?
Yep.
Rolled them up, and then went out and threw them in people's yards. Think of 20 years from now when you try and explain that to somebody. Yeah, I used to take them and just wing them into people's yards. That's how people got news. And they'll be like, what, did you ride a dinosaur to deliver them? So, if we take and set aside that model of trucks, print, ink, which, by the way, is how we make all our money, and just throw all the sticks in the air, what does a newspaper look like? First and foremost, not going to be much of a newsroom. Why are we all co-located together? Why do we all sit together? It's so our bosses can look at us and feel that they're in charge of something, but there's no practical reason for us to be together anymore. You want to co-locate your reporters with whatever they're reporting about. If they're at the cop shop, if they're doing, it's like, I find it hilarious, editors who still measure somebody's effectiveness in terms of how often their butt is in some office chair. It's like, that really isn't a metric that's going to help you going forward. It isn't how often you see them, it's how often you see their copy on how many different kinds of platforms. And the idea that we're all going to gather around in a central place, and it's fun, it's nice. You have the little parties, the bad wine, the crappy sheet cake when somebody retires. I love all that stuff. Not too much of it, but I like it. But there's no practical reason for it because we're not in, less and less we're in the manufacturing business. You know, when I first started at the New York Times 10 years ago, we were in the old building, and at 10 o'clock, the first edition would start, and I was up on the third floor, and your chair, your butt would just vibrate a little bit when the press has started up. God, that was exciting. It was so cool. I mean, I couldn't believe I was at the New York Times, and then when I first, you know, I was just sitting there waiting for someone to come and say, "You're not supposed to be here. A terrible mistake has been made." But, you know, sitting in my cube and hearing the presses start up and was just extraordinary. But those times are over. I don't even really know where our paper is printed anymore. The simultaneous sharing of information where you can do real-time sharing of all types of files. You can be on IM while you're looking at the same video. You can Google Chat and bring in everybody you want. I watch our page one meeting, which goes off at 4 o'clock today, and there's a phone in the middle of the table, and Washington calls in. And I just have to laugh. It's like, we're going to put that guy on speakerphone. There's a screen this big up there, and the technology is not exactly unknown, but we get habituated. It's important to say this desire to huddle together around a campfire is not solely an old media thing. Look at Gawker, look at BuzzFeed, look at Huffington Post. They all are building out great big newsrooms. They're doing it because it makes us feel good, not because there's any reason to do it. The other thing about this newspaper, as long as we're hitting the reset button, is, you know what? The ones today don't have a lot of ads in them. They might not have many going forward. The whole model of this an ad-supported business that the consumer nominally participates in is going away. Last year at the New York Times, revenues from consumers, which would be subscribers in print, digitally, surpassed revenues from advertisers. And that's a historic moment. And that's part of what's going on is our business model, I don't want to get too deep into the sort of weeds or Brussels sprouts of what we do, but we're built on scarcity in print. Look at the New York Times. If you look at page 3 of the New York Times, upper right, there's Tiffany's. Upper right, page 3. Been there 100 years, and I'm not exaggerating, over 100 years. There's only one page 3 that Tiffany's can be in. You move that over to the web? No. We can make more of anything. And when you can replicate and manufacture over and over as much as you want, you lose anybody with minor awareness of economics, you lose compression on pricing when you have no scarcity. So we've gone from dollars in print to dimes on the web, and now we're headed toward a much smaller screen. We're going to talk about that. That's kind of scary, actually. As more and more, let's just talk about that. If you think of Google had bad earnings this quarter. They're having a rugged time. Poor Google. They ate and destroyed the news business, and now they're struggling with quarterly earnings. I feel kind of bad for them. Here's what when you look on, take out your smartphone. I'm not going to take mine out because it's a BlackBerry, and I'm ashamed that I'm on a BlackBerry. It's like, where'd you get that, Fred Flintstone? I like my berry, what can I say? But when you look at that little screen, all known thought is on it, right? One click away. It's great. You know what won't fit on there? A business model. Teeny tiny little square in the corner. You can't sell that. New ad models are going to have to come in as more and more people, and the amount of people consuming information. And, we have a wonderful product on the iPhone, and you can hit it, get headlines, and it's really, really terrific. Pretty tough to jam ads in there. So I don't think the papers per se are going to go away, but they'll be more like, did anybody ever see Dave Eggers? You know who that guy is? He made this thing called Panorama, and it was a newspaper that had a wingspan about this big, and it cost $15, and it had 270 pages. That's pointing a way forward, which is newspapers will be a luxury artifact. If you see me with one of these, right, walking around, you go, he's got $600 to buy one. That's all you know about me. You can't tell anything. I was talking to James Patterson, the airport novelist. He would hate that I say that. It's what he is. Guy has sold 260 million bucks, so we shouldn't feel bad for him. But he's like, I get on a plane, I can't see if anybody's reading me anymore. I think there will be a time. On my plane ride down, the guy next to me was an FT guy reading the Financial Times. I, of course, was reading the New York Times. But between us was the Wall Street Journal, which was the Venn diagram intersect of our conversation. We couldn't have done that with the iPads. You know what I mean? We were both on our iPads, but we both had the newspapers. Why do I have a newspaper after I've just made fun of it? Here's the thing. Every single day, and I think this speaks to kind of the future a little bit, stuff goes whizzing by. Wow, that happened, that happened, that happened, that happened. Crazy stuff happens. And you know what? Talk to my kids. They know what happened over and over. They don't know how they know it, though. Did you see that in the checkout line at the grocery store? Was that on your Facebook feed? Was that a Twitter referral? Was that in the cab you just rode in? How do you know what you know? Is it because you watched Jon Stewart last night? I never know how they know what they know. But you know what? I don't know how I know what either. I finish the day and I'm just like, whoa. We're all sponges, and after a while, it just kind of bounces off. I follow 600 people on Twitter, and they're pushing links at me all the time. Good stuff. I have 380,000 followers on Twitter. I've only got so much sort of mind share. So after a day of everything whizzing by, what I like is that somebody like Rich and his worthy crew is going to decide, you know what? These were the 6 important stories. You know what happened, but you don't know why. And I found myself, after a while, enjoying that hierarchy. That's a magazine function. That's not a newspaper function. That's what Time and Newsweek, Time, sorry, do. Is a sort of step back. I used to watch, go to our 4 o'clock meeting, I would see the editors talking about various stories, and meanwhile, up on the web, stories would be pivoting, going away, changing, eliding. And I said, what folly to decide at a certain point that we're gonna do this. But you know what? I think there's extreme value in that, and we're still doing, through the efforts of my colleague Paul Wilson and his colleagues, we're still selling quite a few of those, in part because we went to people and said, you're at our website all the time. At first at 20 times, now at 10 times. After we've seen you a bunch of times, we go, good to see you. How about showing us a little sugar here? How about participating in this news gathering? When we decided to do it, everyone said, you are drilling a hole in the bottom of your boat. You're going to sink. You're going to disappear from the ecosystem of news on the web. Nobody's going to sign up for your crappy digital product. And you're going to lose those 40 million Unique users. You know what? None of that happened. We have 530,000, is that about right, digital subscribers? Maybe a few of them in this room. Our Sunday circulation is kind of held steady, which is a very important, the print circulation, you know why? Because when we went to people, we said, yeah, it's going to be XX for the digital. Or if you get the Sunday paper, you can have it free, all of it free. Everyone, oh, I got a workaround. I can just get the Sunday paper and then get the digital product. And we're like, that sounds fine to us. That's great. It's helped us build the moat around that business. The other thing to think about is when people opt in, if we're just out in the wide world of the web, that's what it's called, right? That people can take our news, Gawker, Huffington Post, and replicate it away from us. And they can run that much of it and then pretend like they're linking back to us. The clinical term, I think, is stealing. That's what it is. There it is. No, it's aggregation. I'm sorry. But they can do that, and they can replicate our audiences as well. So what can we do about that? Well, we can ask consumers to sign up, right? But the one thing they can't replicate is people who've opted in to buy the New York Times. So we've got, our print folks, plus 500,000 digital subscribers. We know a lot about those people. They give us money all the time. They probably have more money than most. And that's creating a new ad business for us. It's not going to work for everybody. In New Orleans, Glenn and I have discussed this, the Times Picayune is down to printing 3 days a week. They took a look at the business model of newspapers, which is we lose money 4 days a week when we put the newspaper out there. Like Monday is the worst day. And we make money 3 days a week. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put the paper out 3 days a week. And we're going to have a digital product for the rest of the time. Detroit has decided, you know what, we're not going to do home delivery on certain days. Kind of frightening. As somebody goes to New Orleans a lot, and the idea of the Times Picayune, which I think we could all agree, pretty dang good print newspaper, terrible website. And it's like, why are you going to give up what you're good at and go do something you're crappy at? Why would you do that? They feel they're up against the wall. They have no other way to do it. And a part of what they're doing is circulation right now is built on big beefy guys like me loading papers into trucks, bringing them to the bodega, bringing them to the 7-Eleven, and then people coming and giving money. There's a whole different set of circulation now that involves social media. Once every 4 seconds, there's content from the New York Times and Twitter. We thought they came to kill us, and it turns out they are our friend, and they are circulating over and over. Some of you younger people with Twitter feeds, you see our stuff bouncing up and being surfaced all the time. Same way with Facebook. In that world where our content is getting pushed out, people want it. We're not drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat. We're installing a new engine in it and moving forward. And a lot of the industry is coming in behind us. One thing that hasn't changed, and I know Mary Alice would be happy about this, is big news is still the killer app. There's like people over and over. What can we do to get people to point toward us? Once you've had, a bear falling out of a tree and landing on grandma who bounces off the trampoline, lands on a skateboard, and water skis with a squirrel, it's like, well, how are you going to beat that? You do a story that nobody knows anything about. You do real, actual news in the world will beat a path to your door. I've had it happen to me before, and it's an awesome feeling. My first editor at the New York Times said, the one thing about being here is every once in a while you're going to be able to grab the world, a little corner of the world, and give it a good shake, and then watch what happens. I'm hooked on that. Doesn't happen to me very often. I'm I'm not what's known as a page one writer. I cover media, which is I'm writing about people who write about things who write about things. Not exactly mission critical. When it came to New Orleans, I did cover the Katrina story. I think I was sent down after the paper's gossip columnist and just before the architecture critics. So in terms of being mission critical, probably not that big of a deal. Part of what we have to think about is where are the green shoots? Who's actually doing something? And you don't have to look too far here. When the Texas Tribune first started, all the dailies here did, and they didn't have a very respectful start. They made some mistakes in terms of being a little bold in their rhetoric. But after time, a kind of détente and partnership has formed that has become very productive. And you can look at that and you say, Evan Smith, genius, right? I love Evan. He's one of the best editors I've ever seen. Who's mission critical at that place is John Thornton, though. He's the beast. He's like the money guy that figured out a 3-year business plans. We're going to do sponsorships. We're going to do events. We're going to do partnerships. A lot of what's been missing from these journalistic partnerships are the money guys, the people who can get on a whiteboard, diagram it out, and come up with a sustainable model for journalism in a very complicated world. And so the days when we hate on people who work the business side, I think those are over as well. I don't want to talk that much more. I'm sort of bored with myself. Let's just skip through a couple of things, then we'll go to Q&A, and we'll talk about what you want to talk about. You have to think of circulation now. Again, remember, like at the times we have most emailed, which seems hilarious. Like, who emails a story ever anymore? Really. But we've got all these social media referrals. A couple years ago, my colleague Brian Stelter was doing a story about how young people consume news. And one of them said, if news is important, it will find me. It does. It shows up. It's just like, did you see? Pops up on your phone. Holy buckets, did you know? Alerts come. The problem is still that the things that drive news, shoe leather, phone calls, document dives, still very expensive. And part of the reason that we're still stuck on putting the white paper out is people give us green paper back, right? And you got to think of the journalism business as being in one hall where it's sort of the white paper, green paper thing. And down here is this wonderful digital nirvana, but there's this long, dark hall in between. It's really scary in there. We're bumping into all sorts of things. It's a rule of business, not just our business. You can't shut off the light in one room, turn off the light in the other. There's these very difficult, hard transitions, and I think you're right in pointing out that we've lost years of experience that these layoffs in the newsroom have really hurt. But there are examples. I mean, I think of the Austin Chronicle, which is a paper I've always read and enjoyed. I come from weeklies. They got a little event thing. What's it called? Oh, South by Southwest. It's like 20,000 people overrunning the place. We're getting in the same business, probably not to the same effect, but we do Times Talks. Last week, one of my colleagues was on a cruise with readers, which is my idea of a living hell. Let's see, I'm on a boat, I'm not driving, that I cannot get off with a bunch of people who want to talk about the New York Times for the next week. How about I just jump overboard right now? But we do lots of things. I make videos every single week with A.O. Scott, our film critic, We do a lot of video around elections. Our memorial honoree would be happy to know that we do specials around the Oscars, of course. The days of just putting out stories like breadcrumbs to pigeons saying feed or not feed as you wish, that's not going to happen. It doesn't really matter what you call yourself. If you look at content on here, right? Let's say you're the BBC, you're Reuters, you're the New York Times, you're ABC. You know what? We all look the same. Everybody's got big headlines, little headlines, piece of video. So the idea of, I'm in radio, I'm in television, that's over. That's in terms of, you got to give up on that. The other day, Brian Stelter, my colleague, who's a smart young man, came in and he said, tonight there's the debates on, there's TV, there's football on, there's baseball on. I'm going to watch it on 3 screens. And I said, that's wild that you're going to watch it on 3 screens. So what did I do? I held up a screen on him. I made a 1-minute video. I hit a simple uploader. It went directly into the New York Times. The metadata was already entered. And it was up on the blog in a minute. No problem. We have tools we never have. We can find all known thought 1 click away. As a reporter, there's just nothing that beats that. You know, some of you may know our CEO, incoming chief executive of the New York Times, used to run the BBC. BBC has got a little problem on their hands. Involves pedophilia. 11 o'clock, my phone lights up yesterday. Don't go anywhere. And I'm like, this cow pie is not going to hit me, is it? Yes, we want you to go up and talk to your new boss about whether he knew about and or enabled a pedophile. Well, thanks, Chief. I'll get right on that. Whoa, we did it. We did okay. But you have to wonder, and you know what? It's a total caper, as Glenn pointed out from the end of my book. It's like just, it's so much fun. I'm not sure what Mary Alice would think of this world. Well, I'm sure she'd find parts of it appalling and parts of it endlessly invigorating, as do I. I'm old and I'm a little tired, I got to say, with all the social media. I'm blogging, I'm Twittering, I'm taking a nap. That's what I'm doing. I'm sleeping. Still, the fundamentals still obtain. Good information, quickly and memorably rendered, never goes out of style. And say what you want about journalism, it beats working in any age. Thank you.
So it's question and answer time. David is not retreating. He's moving down to the level of humanity, because we figure you can still see him there.
Here by hovercraft on my iPad. It's an app.
So we've got 2 microphones on either side here, and we would love to get some questions. And if you have no questions, we'll go home. But come join us. Well, I'll ask the first question while folks line up, if anybody wants to. All right, everybody knows, David, the New York Times is just this marvelous news organization. But how many examples, how many New York Timeses can be created in the world? Is it the only one? Is it planning to be the sort of last human news organization standing, and is that ultimately its business model, the last really excellent organization? Or is it something that people could think about emulating at some point in some way?
Okay.
This will give you something to play with.
Wow, this thing, are they afraid we're going to steal this? I might now, on general principle. I agree with you. The New York Times is one of humankind's greatest creations, give or take me. But I don't think it's far from the only one. I mean, Rupert Murdoch bought the Wall Street Journal. I said he would ruin it. He didn't. I still read that paper all the time. The BBC is amazing. I just interviewed Alan Rushbridger from The Guardian, who's moving into the U.S. They're doing amazing work here. NPR, especially Morning Edition, I think is still killing it. Marketplace, American Public Radio's killing it every single day. New brands, BuzzFeed, doing a great job. New York Magazine, doing an amazing job. I think we're going to look upon this not as, I think the bad part is sort of ending, and we're going to look upon this as many, many amazing works of journalism occurring. And the more honest answer, though, is about regional papers. Is community papers do very well. If you can do a picture of your kid on, like if they publish a picture of your kid on this, and you can put it on the refrigerator, that's probably a newspaper that's going to do pretty good. It gets much bigger than that, probably not. It's the middle that's threatened. That's why I think that what's going on with the Statesman, with Texas Tribune, that's why I think that stuff is so important. And there are other examples of that. Post in Minnesota, Voice of San Diego. It's the middle part that we got to be worried about in terms, because they're not sending people to Washington anymore. They're not covering their state capitals, which is where all the money is, and forget about foreign coverage. So I worry about the middle, but the top and the bottom I think are going to do really, really well.
Hi, Mr. Carr. Thanks for coming.
Call me David.
Okay.
I get scared with this Mr. Carr stuff.
Thanks. I've read a bit how Twitter is kind of like rebranding itself as a traditional media outlet, and is starting to conceive of itself in that way. And I was wondering what you thought about that. It seems like the journalistic enterprise has really embraced Twitter.
Yeah, that's a really smart question, because we've all... Okay, you know what? I'm going up here. I can't lean into that thing, so... Is this guy still on? Hello? Okay. Now I can lord over all of you. You asked about Twitter, young lady. Things have sort of come and gone in terms of social media, but you're so right. News organizations are frantic about Twitter. And now Twitter is, and for those of you who don't use it, I'm not going to evangelize about it. It will ruin your life. So believe me, you know. But for those of us who are actually addicted and can't get off it, they're now organizing into pages, is sort of what you're talking about, right? To where if you want to follow the Olympics, you can just open up Twitter and see what's going on. And it's a little like Google over and over. Google's told us over and over, we're not a media company. We're not interested in making media. We're just going to destroy your business model so you don't make any more media or make the kind of media that we want. Twitter is, if you ever go there, I've been to their headquarters, they're just so friendly. They're so nice. They got all that free food and the foosball and the ping pong, and you get hypnotized by it after a while, right? I think they're incredibly ambitious. And what you should think of Twitter as a network, and it's not just short bursts about what your dog is doing or, hey, my baby just rolled over, although that's great. That again and again, what Twitter does is carry links to information, and it does so well and so precisely that you wonder if after a while they're going to end up, we're going to end up just being, as we were for Google, just a feed for them, and that they're going to figure out the ad model, and we're not. So the other thing about Twitter is, in New York or San Francisco, that's all anybody talks about, Twitter this, Twitter that. And if you start to look at Twitter geographically, it's really a coastal thing. It's really a media bubble thing. And I don't know that, you know, the rest of the world really even gives a rip about it. So you have to kind of wonder. And I think at a certain point, people will reach their limit in terms of, Like when the next thing comes along, like when Google Plus came along, I was just like, I can't have one more thing. I engage in Facebook, even though I hate it, just because as a journalist, I have 100,000 subscribers, best defeated. I really don't know what Facebook is for. It's a bunch of freaks as far as I'm concerned, but it's just like, okay, their audience. But I think to keep an eye on Twitter and what they're actually up to, you're smart. That's a worthy question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so is this on now? I'll just speak really loud. When somebody buys a newspaper, it's assumed that they're going to read it. That's their intention when they buy it. People out on the internet, perhaps they're just blowing by an hour at a time. Maybe they don't intend to look at the New York Times. But something brings them to the New York Times, how do you intend to keep them there? Because even if the page isn't loaded as fast as they like them, I think, well, let me see what's going on in sports news, ESPN, let me go look at my Facebook profile, didn't get there fast enough. So what ways to get people on your site? Are there things in place where you're trying to keep their attention different than you would in a paper format?
What he just said is probably a better description of what's going on than anything I said, which is, what about, not did you toe touch the New York Times? Did you come in, boom, got it and left? What's sticky? What keeps you? That's the fight. It's not hard to get people come in. People don't go to our homepage anymore. They come in side doors off of referrals over and over. And that's how they show up. But what are we going to do to keep them? So I don't know if you noticed, but when you go down, get toward the bottom of the page, assuming we've done a story interesting enough to keep you in it for 800, 900 words, right away, a related, relevant story comes in from the side. If you like this, maybe you'll like that. Embedded in that is a video. For my column this week, I did a video. If you thought this guy was nice and funny, let's show you a video. It's the stickiness over and over that is, meaning how long people stick around. Because I do these videos 7 or 8 minutes with A.O. Scott, who's the brilliant New York Times critic, and we do a show about culture and media. And before he started doing it, I said, what would make me click on a video of 2 white guys at a table talking for 7 to 8 minutes? My answer was nothing. I would never do that. And then to my surprise, we got like 20, 30,000 people tuning in, which is not terrible, right? But then we start to look at time spent. And like they watch for a little while, out they go, side door. That's the thing about the internet. It's totally friction-free, and there's always something right over the hill. Part of what we confront over and over is the most interesting thing to you is your email. It's hard to get by that. Everything in your email, if you're not all spammed up, is sort of about you and telling you. Then your social networks. And then it's hard to get to that level of relevance to get your attention. Besides that, that's why we're in such a dogfight for the attention of young people is it's hard to get anything that's more interesting than who hooked up with who last night. I mean, it's just like, that's juicy. Nice segue, sorry.
That's okay. You spoke about the role of the editor in print journalism and how important that is in creating the stories that are in the paper. I was both a reporter and then an editor for a community newspaper before I retired. What I don't see on a lot of the internet supposed news is that editorial function, that filter, that looks at the story before it gets splashed on the page and tracks, is this right? Does this follow? Does this need another attribution? Do you need the other person's point of view? How do you create that editorial filter that print media has for the web-based media?
Well, I mean, there are heavily curated sites, right? There's your Slates, there's your Daily Beast, there's the front page of Huffington Post. But for the most part, what's going on is things are being voted up or voted down by users. And the danger of that, and I share your concern, is that let's say that you and I go on the web and we search barbecue in Lockhart, right? You're going to get a different result than I am. Google knows us, knows what we're into, knows I'm kind of a rib guy, knows you're kind of a brisket person. And a bubble develops around it. So between what we're getting on Twitter from our friends, what we're getting from Facebook and our friends, even Google and their news are starting to return results. So what do we end up with? We end up with one group in one vertical and one group in another vertical. What I confront over and over whenever I write about Jon Stewart or Rush Limbaugh or either the presidential candidates, I get just this hateful, crazy people coming over the hill, and they all believe it's true. I found it on the internet.
Yeah,
I found it on the internet, and it's like...
which does not automatically make it true.
No, if you and I decided, if we got together and we had an argument, and I said the U.S. government took down the World Trade Centers, and you'd say, well, that's actually not true, David. Where's your tinfoil helmet? I would take you on the web, and I would show you how they got installed, who did it, over and over. So there's this confirmation bias that occurs in terms of like how you search things. And I do worry about the absence of a village common, of something Glenn works on and talks a lot about is where are you going to come up with, we can't all be entitled to our own facts. There has to be a place where, facts are held in common. I thought the last debate where it's like these two guys are agreeing with each other, but they're not, they really have nothing in common. I thought it was such an apt metaphor for what's going on. The one thing I'll say, though, is like the internet is broken, people's taste for news, people don't really care about politics, da-da-da. How many people watch the debates? How many, right? Okay. Almost 100, and I don't know what the ratings were on the third. I'm going to guess 190 people. 70 million people watched the first debate. And I think that's extraordinary. Is it second only to the Super Bowl in terms of audience? I mean, I always find it mysterious about, the elusive unicorn in the wild, the undecided voter. It's like, oh, it's so unclear who this guy is and who that guy is. I'm totally confused too. I'm stunned. I'm stunned by the fact that there's an undecided voter left in America. I am, but I think it's super cool when the second debate came on. We got like takeout and we had the big TV on. We're getting all ready and super excited to watch it. And our 15-year-old came walking into the room and sat down, and I was just like, shh, don't say anything. Don't spook her. Sat down and watched the whole debate. I find that encouraging. I mean, I think people have never known more about presidential politics or been more confused. But at least they are participating. So this age where everything's going to go to hell, where people like you and me, who've been in the news business for a while, I think part of what's going on is you watch, we start to adopt the tools of the insurgency. We're doing videos, we have Twitter feeds on our page. But if you look at Gawker, BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, what have they been doing in the last 2 years? They've been hiring a lot of reporters. Huffington Post won a Pulitzer last year. So what looked like, this war, you see them marching toward each other, and pretty soon, like I said about all businesses, they're all going to look the same. So I do think it's not going to be what it once was, but I think there's a new kind of hybrid media forming that will probably be good for the Republic. Are we good? How are we doing on time?
We could do the two folks who
Oh, I didn't even see you guys. Sorry. I got this bad neck, so it's like I can. Anyways, go ahead.
I was just curious, very early on, you mentioned that you see no practical reason whatsoever for us to be together as journalists in the same space, trying to come up with our coverage. And I'm wondering, do you really honestly believe that based on the years of conversations over the tops of cubicles and the ways in which we talk to each other and look in each other's faces and come up with ideas as opposed to using the tools of the insurgency? You know, we can Twitter and text each other, but will that create that same richness of coverage?
I was worried when you came up to the microphone with notes, which is why I didn't call on you and pretended you weren't there. I was engaging in a bit of hyperbole. But I think it is true that a new water cooler and a new way of conversation is occurring. And I think part of what's going on, if you look at, do you work in a newsroom?
Not anymore.
Okay. If you watch the newsroom these days, you walk into it, nobody's talking to anybody. Everybody, we're so busy both consuming and producing content that we're not having those conversations over the cube anymore. It would be nice, it would be great. And you know, when times get scary, of course you want to gather around the campfire and tell stories and, you know, chit-chat and stuff. But the practical value of it, I just see rooms, especially young people in our newsroom. If you want them, you got to come out and go, hello, is this thing on? The new trend is headphones that don't lead to anywhere, so they can type. You know what I mean? They're big, like muffs. And I think to myself, well, you should be able to make a story while other people are talking around you. I don't see that esprit de newsroom that I used to. I think there's less and less, and it comes at great cost. If you come to New York and go into our building, Renzi Piano built it. It is the most magnificent newsroom you've ever seen. We really can't afford it. We did a lend-lease on it right after we bought it. And so the idea, again and again, that to make a newspaper, what you see over and over in these sales of newspapers is what's worth the most is their buildings. You know, San Diego sold for the value of its building. Florida paper sold for the value of a building. So if I was making a big news operation right now, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I love it. I love a newsroom, but it's weird. I mean, newsrooms aren't what they once were. Nobody drinks anymore. If you open up the drawers, there's actual office supplies in there. It's like, whose idea was this? People don't go out afterwards because they're already working 10 hours, and I got to get home, and I'm constantly hooked to the office on BlackBerry. Part of my issue is I'm already at work when I'm not at work. So sometimes, because I live in the suburbs and go into New York, they'll call me and I say, you know, I'd really like to come in, but I'm too busy. I don't have time to come to work. I've already done a couple of blog posts, for crying out loud. Let me be. So, sir, are you multitasking while we're... Don't make me come down there. I will.
Trying to record you and trying to look at the fact on you. So yes, I've got a very good representation.
And you've got a notebook, too. That's all the questions we have time for. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hearing you talk about how my generation consumes news reminds me of an anecdotal experience, which is just that I was on debate in high school, and we had to consume a very large amount of news. But we consumed most of it for free. Each day, I'd probably go to Google News, I'd click down each link, I'd probably have 16 tabs open, I'd read each article, and if I hit a paywall, guess what? There are 10 related articles listed right next to that article. I click until I find one that's free. And I had a few subscriptions, but the thing is, we consume information for much less money now, because, you know, in a lot of ways we're freeloading, but we consume much more information for free than we would have been able to previously. So how do you think that going forward, your news
Well, first of all, we got to find out where you live and suffocate you with a pillow. For asking that question. Then once we've done that, eliminated one more of our enemies. The question you pose is an existential one, a fundamental threat to who we are. Historically, the newspaper business was built on, you guys, people your age never did care about newspapers. They cared about the college paper if they worked on it, or the college paper if it covered the college. But in terms of daily paper, nothing, no nothing. You leave, that our old model, and I think you guys would agree with it, is you leave, you get married, you reproduce, you go to IKEA, and then you start to worry about the schools. And we go, man, you want to buy IKEA, you're worried about the schools, you're worried about, we are so there for you. Here's the problem with you guys. Number one, you don't get married. You hook up but don't reproduce. And then when you do tune in for news, God dang it, you don't pay for it. The idea going forward is that as you, right now when you go to the New York Times, if you've been there 10 times, you're going to hit the paywall and you're going to keep going. Our thing is that somebody like you, and I know you can do this, you can game our paywall. You can put in the headline. Oh, I can see you look guilty, right, when I say that. That you can game our paywall. You put in the headline exactly as it was. I've done the same thing with the Wall Street Journal and the FT myself. And after a while, I think to myself, I'm going to pay a convenience charge to be able to access this information over and over as much as I want. And maybe we hook you with our World Cup. Maybe we get you with our coverage of CMJ or some other music fest. But after a while, and this is not now, just keep stealing away, keep sampling, and then eventually we're going to convert you. If we get you thinking of us as an app and not a subscription, then we're going to sort of win over time. That subscription is a terrible word. You pay for stuff on your phone all the time. I know you do. And if we can get over into that world, then all of a sudden we won't be the dad in the basement. We'll be the cool kids at the party. Enough out of you. Get away from that mic.
Last one.
Go ahead, please.
I feel like I have such an unsheet analog question, so forgive me.
That's good, man. Let's get down. Let's do some paper, man.
So we have this new euphemism the past couple of years, the low information voter.
Yeah.
How much do you think all these different iterations of media contribute to that?
Well, like I said, it's a mystery to me how somebody could be low information, because it seems like we move through, it's almost like oxygen. You're getting so much information about these. But I was speaking with Mark Shields, who is an analyst on PBS, and he said, look, we're freaks. We're into this stuff, you and I. So most people aren't like that, and it's a very personal decision. And that's why the debates are doing so well, is people like, I don't want to hear what Chris Matthews thinks of someone. I just want to look at him myself, decide if he's telling the truth. And I'm not like, I mean, if somebody thinks the president is a Kenyan, then I'm bummed out, right? Or that, that Mitt Romney's getting orders through his magic underwear, or that I'm frightened of. But in terms of whatever level of information they have, I'm thrilled for them to participate. I live in Montclair, New Jersey, which is like a super crunchy, it's kind of like Austin, in terms of did people vote a certain way, dress a certain way, spoil their kids rotten, But it's a very liberal area. And my neighbor, like way out front of it, just took a Romney sign and just went right into his line. And at the bus stop in the morning, people are like, "Oh, that's so appalling." Just put that sign out there as a big F you to all of us. And I'm like, man, that is the pageant of democracy. If you believe the polls, almost half the people, or maybe a majority of Americans, are going to vote for this guy. And somehow, because this guy is willing to just say, you know what? I'm voting for this guy. Here's my sign. I don't really care about his level of information. I'm like for him. I'm happy that he's demonstrating. Yesterday on the web there was a woman in their a dorm room, and she had a cardboard sign, and it said, Kenya called and asked for its village idiot back, right? Kenya was spelled wrong. Idiot was spelled wrong. She had a rather odd expression on her face, and I don't want her to vote. I just soon she stay away until she can straighten out her pizza box signs, which is all over the web. But in general, who's to blame for low information? Oh, you did ask a question. I should try and answer it. Can you blame people for being overwhelmed at a certain point? And it's just like, it just starts to bounce off after a while. And just help me out a little bit. When you say low information voter, do you mean somebody who thinks the president is a Kenyan, or?
I think that a low information voter, for example, will be watching the debates and unable to tell what will be a lie and what will be a fact because they're not informed enough.
Yeah, but if you look at this whole thing about, every time you turn around, CNN, MSN, let's fact check this. Let's turn this over to our fact checkers. We've always done that. And people always just sort of ignore it. I mean, if you look at Romney's position in the third debate, he's like, well, he sounded like Obama's Secretary of State. He's just like, wow, dude, that's amazing. And he's like, I would do everything the president is doing, except I would do it a little bit better. And you think to myself, well, if people can't figure that out?
But they can't. I mean...
Well, what do you mean, though? That seems elitist on your part. Maybe they will.
I think there's a lot of indication that a lot of people are not aware that, for example, that I'm not really trying to trash Romney here.
Yes, you are.
I think a lot of people are not aware, for example, in watching the third debate, that Romney was reversing practically every position he has held and iterated across multiple forums. I think a lot of people were not watching that debate, were not aware of it.
Well, yeah, but okay, but if they elect him president, then I mean, what's your alternative? I mean, it seems the people speak whether they're informed or not. That's what we signed up for. There shouldn't be a civics test on the way into the polling booth, should there?
No, I don't think there should be a civics test on the way into the poll, but the question I asked you was about the media's responsibility.
I think the media has never done a better job of informing people over and over, again and again, on the web, on television, on cable, in newsprint, of where voters, of where candidates stand, and there's never been more information about it. I think people have self-assembled into their own bubbles and their own verticals, and they don't hear what does not apply. So,
Jim Davis gets the last word.
One more quick, is it working?
you speak with the voice of God anyway, so go ahead, Jim.
Well, I thought I would just give a little clue of how you got here. I was reading the Austin Chronicle, and I saw a little piece that there was this movie called Page One.
Yes.
And it looked interesting. I mentioned it to Jan, and we went and saw it down at the Violet Crown Theater. And we came out of there, and you know, I was sitting there in the movie, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's that guy that I've read occasionally in the New York Times.
Right.
And from the movie.
Except they replaced me with like this homeless guy. I was not. I mean, as you guys can see, I'm incredibly great looking and well spoken. And the guy in that movie, kind of rough looking, kind of weird. Go ahead.
He was fascinating, and Jan and I both came out of there and said, God, Mary Alice would have loved this movie, and Mary Alice would have loved this guy. And I wonder if you would just tell us a little bit about the movie, about how it came about, and, you know, has it affected you anyway?
Well, got me here, apparently. So there's that. Here's what I would say about that. People, if you guys haven't seen that movie, you should totally see it. And the thing is people always go, hey, saw your movie, man. It's not my movie. I just wander through it, right? And bump into things and yell at people and do whatever I do. But he made a really interesting movie about newspapers. And newspapers are boring, let's face it. I mean, I write about them all the time. And it's hard to get people to read about them. And he made a story about a newspaper that I think was great. His initial idea was, I'm going to do you and then do the media sort of meltdown over your shoulder. He was with me for 4 days, and I just said, dude, I cannot do this. I can't. If you want to signal to somebody what an asshole you are, have a camera crew, like, follow you everywhere. Oh, there's that jerk. Him and his camera crew, you know, wander around your newsroom with. And I just said, I can't do that. But if you would get some of my other colleagues to participate. Because initially when he asked me, he said, well, I'd like to shoot you. And I was like, oh, sure, ask my bosses about that, thinking I'll just scrape them off that way and get rid of them. And after a while, I just had to say to him, look, you could end up getting your story, whatever it is. I won't get mine. I can't have you around me all the time. So he broadened out. He shot by himself, which I think was really important. Didn't bring a big crew. And made what I thought was a very impressive movie. Of course, when we reviewed it, we tore the arms and legs off it. It's just like, hey, that's how we roll. We hated your movie about us, your nice movie about us. Welcome to the New York Times. In terms of its effect, I mean, not a great deal. You know what? Because, you know, Glenn read something from my book. The book is mine. I made it. I'm not proud of everything in it, but I'm proud that I did it. The movie is somebody else's achievement. I supported it. I traveled behind it. I did press for it, but it isn't really mine. And so, you know, it's a good way to, you know, if you're on the subway and somebody says, hey, saw you in that movie, it's like, you are a huge journalism nerd. It's a good way to, like, identify people that way. But in a way, being the star of a documentary about newspapers is like being the tallest leprechaun. It doesn't really amount to much. Thanks, you guys.
One last little ceremony here. This is Jan Dmitri, Jim's better half, I think.
Yes, and a good and old friend of Mary Alice's. Thank you all so much for being here. And David, dude, you are a blast. This was great fun, as I suspected it would be. And in lieu of a lovely engraved plaque, we have, as a small token of our appreciation, a first edition of an A.J. Liebling book called The Wayward Pressman.
Bless you.
And although...
It's bad manners to open it, right?
Oh, no, you can open it. And if you're not a collector of first editions, now you are. And I'm going to... Although your styles are so very different, the message is so much the same. And I'm going to read just a tiny bit about this book so that you'll understand why we felt this was the right gift for him. Although it is written under the guise of autobiography, The wayward pressman is in reality a glimpse into the history of the newspaper business. Liebling spends little time recounting the great stories he told, but presents instead a rarely seen view of the publishing world, how to find work when you've lost it, how to get the story when it just isn't coming, and most importantly, how to recognize when you're in the right place at the right time. His chosen profession is a most unglamorous and often unappreciated undertaking. Reporting can become discouraging at times, but Liebling's enduring idealism about the profession consistently rings true. He is critical of the press because he is unwilling to compromise his high standards. The book contains the advice of a reassuring sage. He's been there before you and knows how hard it can be at the whim of the editor with a deadline swiftly approaching. His style is inspiring, and his perspective is one that is sorely missing from journalism today. But it is not entirely missing from journalism today, as David has just so eloquently shared with us. Thank you again for being here.